Country Music Week with our really wonderful friends, Michael Peterson and Jill Chambers.
And they're
Many
both so much fun and so interesting. It's so awesome.
Remember Michael, who's a million-selling, Grammy-nominated country music star, who's whose songs have hit #1 on the charts 5 times, including the 4th most popular country wedding song of all time, From Here to Eternity, which I've heard over and over again.
That was like the best song. Like, awesome.
My favorite song of his is the iconic Drink, Swear, and Lie, which is not what you think it is.
If you listen to it, it's not what you think. It's actually a very positive message.
He's been a songwriter for the Stars, with the unusual good fortune to have had his compositions recorded by the Hall of Famers and Grammy winners of country, rock, pop, gospel, Latin, including Travis Tritt, Timothy Schmidt of the Eagles, pop superstar Janice Williams, the Imperials.
Wow.
Contributing author for 8 books, including the #1 New York Times bestselling Chicken Soup for the Soul series. We're actually friends with Mark Victor Hansen. But, you know, how I met Michael was when he came to the clinic, when Michael and his wife Jill, who I'll introduce in a second, were married. One of their gifts to themselves was a scan at Amen Clinics. And my staff goes, "Oh, you have to meet these 2 really awesome people." And we've just become close friends since then.
Well, before you go too far, you need to introduce Jill.
And Jill Chambers, Colonel Jill Chambers.
That by itself is just so cool.
Renowned for her path as a woman in the military and for creating a PTSD program for soldiers after her own experience surviving the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon, which we want her to talk about. She's widely recognized as the first person in the history of the U.S. military to develop a successful, sustainable strategy to reduce stigma associated with mental health challenges the military culture, which, as a former Army medic and then Army psychiatrist, that's a hard thing to do with all those macho guys. And
it's pretty awesome.
So just welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. You are what I both consider brain warriors.
And what a combo. I mean, that's so cool.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Really awesome.
We've had such a privilege to be with you today. You guys inspire us every day, and I mean that literally every day.
Well, and vice versa. So both of your stories are so cool.
Our day. We think about how we're going to take care of our brains today. So we think of you guys all the time.
Awesome.
So how did you guys tell this story of how you guys ended up at Amen Clinics?
Jill and I, when Jill got out of the military, you know, she began to sort of contemplate what she was going to do next. And we decided that as we began to learn about different modalities to deal with post-traumatic stress and mild traumatic brain injuries, that we wouldn't talk about any modality that we hadn't tried. And so, you know, there were several things we learned along the way. We learned about, you know, neurofeedback and guided imagery and heart math. And we were doing a show in Wisconsin, and there was a little bookstore next to the hotel. And we were over there just sort of killing some time, you know, looking for some sugar. That'll be appropriate here. You could do some ice cream or something, you know. And so I probably had an ice cream cone in my hand when I picked up Change Your Brain, Change Your Life.
That's hilarious.
It was the Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, the women's.
No.
No, wasn't that yet? Okay, all right. So it's just Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. So I picked the book up, started looking through it, but then they're eating my ice cream, you know. And I probably had pancakes for lunch or something, you know.
Oh, no, you're stupid.
Yeah. So I said, Jill, look at this book. So she started looking at it. And so we bought the book. We read the book. We were like, wow, blown away. We said, well, we should learn more about this. And right about that time, I found a new book that you wrote, the one that was focused on women. And you can say the title. I'll make sure. Unleash the Power. Yeah. So I gave it to Jill as a gift. And at this point, I'll hand the story over to her.
So we got married on the 1st of January, 2013. He gave me the book several weeks after that. So I read it. And now, you know, we're living together. It's our first 3 months of living together. And, you know, things are happening like in the kitchen, like, Jill, if you just put these bowls here, things would be easier. And Jill, if you just did this, you could make it. And after a while, it was just read the book. Just read the book.
I can just see this. He's talking to a U.S. like Army colonel. Like, I'm trying to envision this whole conversation and these dynamics. This is hilarious. This is great.
It was very funny. You know, there's no fights, but it was always, you know, if you did, you know, put this, just all those kinds of situations.
Right.
So we read the book.
That's awesome.
Shortly after that, so now we're getting to April, because that's when we went to see you.
It's a really cool story how this all worked out.
So we're actually at a friend's house in April of 2013. We're in Nashville, actually. And I'm up in our room that we're staying in, and I have your book, Daniel, and I've obviously already read it, but now I'm just perusing through it again because I was so intrigued by it. And at this point, I think, Daniel, we've told you this story, but I just kind of looked up and I said, hey, Michael and I are supposed to get this brain SPECT imaging thing done. How about a sign? Now, Daniel, have I told you this?
No.
Because this was incredible. I had your book laying open, and it was like in the midsection, so both sides, it's even Steven, right? Books would just lay that way. Your book.
No, right when you said, give me a sign, and she turned around to do something, when she turned back around.
Your book had flipped all the way to the back. Didn't close, but it left it on the page where it said, contact us.
Oh, that's so funny.
It did. I mean, it couldn't have been any easier. And it was like, there was the phone number. I mean, the whole, right there. And I thought,
like, wow.
Hey, that was easy. I wish I had my phone.
You know, because when it flips over and there's now all the weight on one side, you'd think the whole thing would close.
That's so weird. That's great.
Exactly. So at that point, I started to giggle, and I said, well, I wish I had my phone. And there it is on the side table. Well, okay.
That's awesome.
So called, and I don't remember the name of the gentleman that we spoke with, but he was super kind, and he told us that, you know, it could take a while to get an appointment. And when, you know, I mentioned my name, gave my information, mentioned Michael's name, gave the information. And then at that point, he sort of drew back and he said, wait a minute, is this the Michael Peterson that used to do, well, first he said, is this the Michael Peterson? I thought, okay, he must be a country fan. But he said, is he the guy that used to go around to schools and do all these strengths of feet and speak to kids and read things with his head? It's like, oh,
so that's how we knew him. That's so funny.
It was super coincidence. So this guy awesome. Got all excited. I got all excited. Very quickly, we were able to get an appointment with you. And of course, I ran downstairs. I was like, Michael, you have to talk to this guy. He knows you. And so
funny.
It was just a fun series of beautiful coincidences that happened on purpose.
That's so great. That's so great. Yeah, if you believe in coincidence, right? So, which we don't. That's awesome.
So then what happened? So you came.
Yeah, we came. And really, the sales pitch that Jill gave to me was, we're going to go to do this so that we can equip ourselves per our protocol of not talking about things that we haven't experienced. We're going to equip ourselves to help veterans. So that's the reason why we went. Of course, I had no idea at that point, really, that there was a greater, deeper, more profound, life-changing reason.
I love that.
And actually, while we were there, I think I was in my second day, and I did this thing again. I said, boy, I sure would like to meet Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yeah,
I'd really like to meet him in person. I wish that could happen. So, well, you know, what could hurt? I called your secretary again, who's a beautiful woman whose name I don't remember. I've been doing memory rescue, but that's anyway, I called her and I asked her, is it possible? And she couldn't have been sweeter. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. He's up in San Francisco and he won't be back until Saturday. And you guys are done on Friday. It's like, well, you know what? I tried. Daniel, within 30 minutes, she called me back and she said, weirdest thing. Daniel just called me and said he's cutting his trip short and he's coming home. You can meet him on Friday. And that's how we met you. I don't know if you even knew that. That's so exactly how we met you, because I asked if we could just meet you in person. And there you have the story.
That's so cool.
And then, so we fell in love with each other. I remember that. But how did the evaluation change your life?
You take that first?
You go first.
Well, for me, I love the fact that that you all and your team were able to identify that I actually did have a post-traumatic experience. She showed me the triangle, and just so much more interesting things that you could tell about what was going on from my brain SPECT imaging. One of the key things that you taught me is that after we met and you looked at my brain scan, you asked me how my bone density was. Had I ever had a bone density test? And I thought, well, okay, yeah, no, but I'm sure I'm fine. I mean, I get lots of sun. I'm doing calcium. I'm good to go, and I work out. I'm good. And you challenged me, and you said, yeah, you know what? Do me a favor and go ahead and just get this bone density test. Okay, you know, I went to Nellis, got it done. Ooh, I was literally on the verge of osteoporosis.
Oh, geez.
I would have never in a million years even wanted to get that test.
Well, you'd had your yearly physical, and they said, oh, you're fine.
But of course,
yeah, but they don't check for all that stuff. See, we check for stuff people don't check for.
I know. I was
so I remember on the outside, your brain looked super healthy because you do a lot of the right things. But on the inside, so it's this thing we call the diamond pattern, where your emotional brain is, wow, really busy. And then I went, so where's the trauma? Because I didn't actually know about the connection.
Yeah, I hated that
with
question.
you and 9/11. So talk about that a little bit. And we see that a lot. People actually don't say, look, I'm really struggling with these symptoms or that.
Well, especially when you're someone like her who's like this colonel and she's tough. So it only shows on your brain
but
scan.
after your 11th funeral, you're not tough anymore, right?
Right.
So tell, just a little bit of that story.
Sure. Well, I didn't realize that I had post-traumatic stress. You know how it is in the Army. Just,
Suck
drive
it up.
on.
Right.
I did for 9 years, but over that period of time, I was able and had a pretty interesting job of trying to figure out what was going on with our service members and why were they coming back with not physical wounds, but more the invisible wounds. So that started leading me down the road of, look at, there's some problems here and things that we actually need to talk about. For me personally, well, it didn't involve me. I was too busy taking care of everybody else and thinking about that. But before we met you, Daniel, and once I got out, I started doing things. I realized that pharmaceuticals weren't the way because I was seeing what was happening with our service members. Granted, some need those. I get that. I'm not discounting that, but they don't need all of them. I've actually learned that. So I began how can I sort of get past these nightmares and just sort of stressing out about airplanes and just a lot of emotional stuff. And I started doing guided imagery and neurofeedback and biofeedback. So that was really an interesting thing. And Daniel, you talked about this now too, is post-traumatic growth. It really, with the 3 months time period, I was so happy that my nightmares I haven't had a nightmare since August of 2009.
Wow.
I've marked it on my calendar just to know. Because I've learned ways to actually do some good coping skills, along with good nutrition, activity, and good sleep.
So just so our listeners know, tell them a little bit about what happened on 9/11.
Well, for me personally, being in the Pentagon, that was...
You were in the Pentagon. Wait, back up.
Yeah.
You were in the Pentagon on 9/11?
Yes.
And you didn't think you had PTSD?
No.
Okay, let's just clear. Okay, go ahead.
Of course, she slept for 2 hours a night for 7 years.
Dear
after that.
Lord. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
You just kind of get up and go.
But you're busy.
But it should be noted that Jill, when I met her, she made caffeine nervous.
I get that. She's
a real high energy person,
right.
So for her to sleep 2 hours a night, I think she probably looked and said, it's just a function of who I am.
Right.
It's always been in state.
But it was definitely.
So you were in the Pentagon. Obviously, you survived. But that was. What was that day like for you?
It was quite traumatic. But we were all, when we saw everything that was happening with the towers. That was New York. We're fine. Everything's okay. And I remember one of the cooks I was actually the military secretary to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. And the cooks worked across the hall, and they reported to me. And all these young cooks started coming in because we had a TV in our office. And several of them said, "Ma'am, these things happen in threes. Both towers had been hit this time." yeah, yeah, yeah. And right after I was finishing my last yeah, all of a sudden, one of my service members who worked for me, Sergeant Lobo, stood up and she had the phone in her hand and she said, "Oh my God, something just happened to Mildred." And Mildred was actually a woman who worked in the Pentagon, but in a different section. "But what do you mean something just happened to Mildred?" She said, everything just went silent. Everything's gone.
No.
Then everything was just immediate at that point. People are rushing by our doors. Where I was located, we didn't even hear anything. But we just saw the rush of people, and then my other sergeant, Senior Master Sergeant Brown, said, "All right, we need to lock up everything." He's a security guy too. "We need to lock up everything down." At that point, it's like, forget the lockup, we need to go. And the three of us got out of the building, because we were very close to we were on the E-ring, so we could get out. And as soon as we stepped out, you could literally lift your hand up and touch that black smoke.
You had to go back in, though, to find the rest of your team.
That
wasn't the end of it.
No, part of our job, the three of us, as the military secretary team, we're responsible for the 300 people that work directly for the chairman.
Now you're looking.
So that means, all the people that were in the different offices, whether in public affairs, the history office, the legal guys.
So now you're back in the building while this is all going on.
Right.
And then, what happened with the funerals? That was part of the trauma, too, for you.
Well, that was, where the plane hit was on, well, for me anyway, it was on the Adjutant General Corps side. I call it that because that was the wing where, and I'm an Adjutant General Corps officer. So a lot of my friends that I grew up with over the years from lieutenant times were over there. So I think there were 23 or 24 service members, military members that I knew personally that I grew up with.
That your friend, close friends.
That were lost that day.
No.
And then funerals start. So
were you actually, I don't even want to ask too many of those questions, but
no, that's okay. I don't mind. I'm fine.
you had to go back in and find your friends. Were those some of the friends you ended up finding?
No. So we were on the side where the plane didn't hit. So it was just smoky and it was just chaotic. You're trying to get 25,000 people out of the building at one time. And you can do that at 5 o'clock on a good day, but not when the plane hits.
That's craziness.
And then trying to, recognize the people. Okay, you belong to us. We need, and Daniel, this in the Army, we all have evacuation routes. And we're all supposed to participate in exercises so we know where to gather. Now, being on the joint staff, you go into another 3 or 4 star general officer and say, "Okay, we're practicing today. We need to get you to get up and go out." It's been check the block. I mean, it really was. And the secretaries, they're not going to go out because the boss didn't go out. So a lot of people honestly didn't know. And we knew that. We knew every time we had to do it. Every quarter, that clock, did they go? Do they know where to go? So really, we felt incredibly responsible now. Okay, this is like the real deal. And the great news is we did. We found everybody, all 300 that we need to find. And we got into where they needed to be. And then, of course, later on during the day, we were able to there was bus transportation, all that kind of stuff to get people home.
It's also, I think to me, one of those things you could overlook easily. But what happened the next day?
Yeah, exactly.
When they said to you, "We're going," everybody, they basically said, "Okay, we're all coming back. We're going back to work tomorrow."
Yeah.
It's kind of like
people don't think about stuff like that. Like if life goes on, but it doesn't just go on.
Right. So it's just like put your game face on and go back to work.
Yeah.
And 7 years later, when she hadn't slept for 7 years, she realized that something was wrong.
But you made a good point. The funerals start and it just keeps going and going.
And going, yeah, exactly. I think I made 7 of them and then thought, okay, for everybody else who's my friend, I know where you are. I can call on you anytime. Things are good. I just can't do this anymore. It was incredibly draining. So I just stopped. I stopped going, and I felt okay about that. I didn't feel any remorse about not going back to any funerals, but still, it was just stressful. And the Pentagon was quiet for the longest time, for weeks and weeks and weeks. People were just like zombies walking down the hall, and you were just sort of in lockstep motion and doing everything that you knew how to do by habit. So it was a very, very surreal thing. Everything that happened at the Pentagon, even my daughter said, "This is exactly the kind of movies that your mother would never let you go to."
Right.
Which was true.
Right. No, isn't it true?
Girl.
That's so true.
I couldn't even get through Wizard of Oz when I was a kid.
Right.
Not.
Oh, that's hysterical. We
See,
just talked
I
about
think it's a terrible movie. He loves it. Anyways, it's a whole nother story.
I love it too.
No, it's terrible. It's a terrible movie.
But so we see you in 2013, which is 12 years after this horrific event.
Right.
And even though the nightmares are gone and you're doing much better, it's still imprinted on
Right.
your brain. And, but, and this is the thing nobody talks about, is by really engaging in brain healthy habits, it can help heal it over time. And so I just remember looking at it and you're like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, well, there's something there still. And I want to hear how that turns out. But then I saw Michael and I'm like, Michael, what'd you do to your brain? And then Michael tells me about
He shows me this picture and I'm like, who does that? Who does that with their head? Like, what is
So
that?
when Tana and I wrote The Brain Warrior's Way, and then we filmed our PBS special, Brain Fit, 50 Ways to Grow Your Brain, Michael allows us to tell his story.
Everybody in the audience gasped.
So talk to us, Michael, about what you were doing with your head.
Well, I think the first indication that I was having brain function problems was the fact that I would break bricks with my head.
Well, you said the first indication he was having brain function problems is that he started to break bricks with his head.
Yeah, I mean, that's, what's your first clue? There it is.
Right.
How did that come about?
You asked, me to contemplate before Jill shared how this had changed my life. And what occurred to me is that, there's a saying that we grew up a lot with that says you can't change your past. You can never change your past. And I was just thinking about your question, and I realized, in a really interesting and powerful way, you can change your past. And how my brain scan changed my past was it created a reframe for me on how I judged myself and my past behaviors. Because I found myself this was been 6 years ago now that we came to see you. So I was in my early 50s, and so I'd had a good bit of life that I'd lived, and there were things in my life that had happened to me and things that I had done that I felt bad about, and I didn't quite know how to process all of that. And my only real paradigm, the most prominent paradigm that I had for making those evaluations on myself, judgments on myself, was a spiritual paradigm. It was a paradigm that I kind of grew up with, and so I saw myself in many ways, as having had some failures. I felt bad about it. And I remember sitting in your office, Daniel, and I remember you telling me that if I had a broken leg, I wouldn't feel like a moral failure because I walked with a limp. And you shared with me the stories of people who have come to your office and come to understand that when you have a brain injury, it makes it almost impossible to not have certain things that show up in your life that are behaviorally related. And so for me, as I heard you tell that story about the people that sit in your office and understand for the first time that they've had brain injury, and suddenly they have a reframe where they realize, the odds of them not having those challenges in their life were slim to none, and as Jill says, slim's out of town.
I love that.
And so for me, it changed my past. In that moment, as I sat there in your office and started to cry a little bit, I had a new paradigm by which I could look at myself and say, I've having some problems in my life because I've had a brain injury, not because I'm a moral failure.
This is powerful.
And that was very healing for me.
Yeah.
And that began to be a real healing process for me. And I think the second way that brain scan and everything that's followed since has changed my life is it's changed many of my behaviors. It's changed my health behaviors. It's changed my sleep. It's changed how I look at exercise. It's changed how I look at nutrition. And so I made some profound changes. You know, I found out I had sleep apnea. After I was with you, you said you ought to go get a sleep test. I found out I was completely stopping breathing up to 27 times an hour. I was 50 pounds overweight. But I'm not those things anymore. I sleep good now. My weight's back to where it's a healthy weight for me. And I'm more careful about my exercise routine. So it's changed my behaviors. And then the third change, really, that if I had to sort of encapsulate all of this that's come about as a result, I feel more like the person I always thought I was. There's more joy. There's more happiness. There's more, I'm less impulsive. You know, I'm more thoughtful before I make decisions and do things in my life. And I got to tell you, that makes me so happy.
Me too.
That's awesome.
So you know, you can't change your past. Well, in some ways you can. And in a sense, you can really change your destiny.
I love this.
Because at the time that I met Jill, both my dads were dead before they were 60. I didn't look at the future and see a long life. And now I look forward and I see that I have a real opportunity to have a vibrant, long, healthy life. So it's changed my perception about what's possible for my future.
I love it.
So thank you.
We also did before and after scans. So what we didn't say is Michael holds some record about being able to break bricks with his skull. And he was part of a group that went to inspire teenagers, and he found he had this gift where he could actually break things with his
So let me
head.
get this straight. You were inspiring teenagers to break bricks with their head. No.
We're using that as a hook to get their attention.
Okay, hold on. I want to back up because I'm teasing you. First of all, I want to thank both of you for sharing those stories, because both of those stories were not only incredibly powerful, but they're very personal. And when people like you, who are very powerful people, successful people, share stories like that, it grabs people's attention, because it's hard to share stories like that. And I want to thank you both so much. And Michael, what you said, it's so many people's story. It's so many people's story. You know, we can forgive people for being in accidents or doing things, but we don't understand when people struggle with this moral dilemma or whatever's going on in their lives, and they do things that are not explainable. And what you just said was just so beautiful and so powerful. And thank you for sharing that. That was just, it was perfect. It was perfect.
Well,
I love what you said about reframe.
Well, I wondered, should I share this or not? Because
Yes.
it is personal stuff. But I realized there's probably a lot of people watching this podcast that are wondering if they're the only one, and you're not.
Yes.
You know? And it's okay to say I had a challenge, and it wasn't. It was because I had some struggles with my brain, and I can get help, and you can get help, and that's why I'm willing to share that, is because I know there's people that need help.
And I can tell you, I know for a fact that people say, if someone like that can do it, I can too. I know they do, and I know they've told you that. So when you share a story like that, it inspires people, because they're like, wait, if someone like that's that successful has struggled and they can do it, then I can do it too. And same Jill, people look at you and they're like, wow, she's so powerful. She's so successful. A female colonel, that's a big deal. For women especially, looking at that's a big deal. I have this soft spot. I'm a sucker for soldiers. I just am. I don't think we treat
Especially me.
Especially you. No, I do. I collect them. I drive him crazy. I collect them. I took my daughter on a survival trip recently to teach survival skills. We we slept out in the wilderness and built our own, shelter, and had to start fires with nothing. And he's like, don't I take good care of you? Why do you do this stuff? But it's just something I do. But anyways, the guy teaching it he was a veteran who was just severely, severely hurt and damaged and had severe PTSD. And he was just a product of that system that didn't work, right? And so, I collect these guys, and I'm like, call Daniel, I'm like, we're taking care of this kid. And so, I do, he's like, okay, what am I supposed to say? So I do this because I have a soft spot for it. So when you guys tell these stories about hope and healing, people listen and they're like, if they can do it, I can do it. And I just, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, I love that you do that, though. That's a beautiful soul. Thank you.
So I want to thank you both again for opening up like you have. And in our next segment, Michael, I want to talk to you about how all of this has affected your creativity. You as well, Jill. And I want to talk about how it's affected your relationship together, all these changes. So stay with us.
Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.